have a person here. His name is Tripp Penick, Captain Tripp Penick, and Captain Penick is in the reserves, and he is a nursing anesthetist here on staff at the hospital, and we've been very fortunate to have him on staff. And so it's my privilege to be able to recognize Tripp, and Tripp's going to speak and tell us a little bit about himself. Thank you.
I think it's supposed to be shaving profile.
We'll get to that later. Let me start by saying I'm not much of a speaker, so I had to type something up. You guys will bear with me while I read it. But as Susan mentioned, my name is Tripp. I'm one of the anesthesia guys here, and I'd like to start by just thanking you guys all for your service. It's an honor to get to speak to you. When Susan asked me to do this, my first thought was one of inadequacy. I've been in the reserves for 5.5 years. I went to jump school, but that's been the extent of my service thus far. My grandfather, Claude Bristol, was a very influential man in my life. Not only was he a loving, humble family man, but he taught me how to build things and how to shoot a gun. I don't think he ever knew it, but he also instilled in me a sense of patriotism. He retired as a postmaster in Helen, Georgia after 33 years. It wasn't until later in my life that I learned that he was also a sergeant first class Claude Bristol, who marched all over Europe and fought the Germans with the 86th Infantry Black Hawk Division. It's my understanding that we have service members here from all branches and who served in all different kinds of theaters. I wish I could tell a story about each conflict we've been in over the years, but I'm going to tell you one of my favorites from World War II. A good friend of mine who went to anesthesia school told me about a book I should read called Abe's Story. Abe Korn was my friend's grandfather. He was also a survivor of the Holocaust. He was 16 when the Nazis invaded his hometown in Poland on the first day of World War II. He survived the entire war as a Jewish prisoner, enduring 2 Nazi ghettos, 8 concentration camps, and a 45-day death march from Auschwitz. 4 years after liberation, he and his wife moved to Augusta, Georgia, where they raised their family and found the American dream. When he passed away in 1972, he left a rough first draft of his memoirs. The excerpt I'd like to read is from a chapter titled Liberation and Recuperation. It takes place when he was a prisoner at Buchenwald concentration camp. And it starts, it says, on the afternoon of April 11th, 1945, I was resting in my barracks. My body was extremely weak from fighting off my foot infection without nourishment or medical attention. I heard something that I couldn't quite believe. I raised my head to listen. Was it my imagination? Was I losing my mind? I heard singing. The singing became louder and more distinct. The huge barracks stable door now swung open. I finally believed my ears because my eyes saw a sight I shall never forget. I beheld a miracle. Some of the same German SS officers whom we had taken orders from but moments before now marched into our barracks with their hands and bodies bound with rope. Some of my fellow prisoners were pricking them and goading them with the officers' own rifles and bayonets. They shouted to the Nazi officers, "Aren't you proud of your accomplishments?" as they pointed to the half-dead bodies that lay on the wooden shelves in our barracks. Fear replaced German pride and authority. With this wonderful turn of events, we saw German officers cringing before former Jewish prisoners. They must have asked themselves, what will the future bring for us now? Behind the singing prisoners came the American soldiers. It was unbelievable, but it was true. We had done everything in our power to stay alive long enough to see the miracle come about, despite so many traps to annihilate us. We were finally seeing the miracle happen. We had to keep stiff upper lips and dry eyes through many years of persecution, of being pushed around, of hunger and deprivation beyond description, of whippings and psychological torture, of being treated worse than animals. We had learned to shut down our emotions and our pain, to turn off our tears. We had ceased to be human. We now began to feel again, to react again, to be human again. We had been resurrected, brought back from a life worse than death. And our American heroes were there before our eyes. All I could do was cry and cry and cry, and I was not alone. Prisoners and soldiers cried together. The American soldiers stood there like giants, in their neck-covered helmets and camouflage uniforms. Seeing them look upon us with heart and feelings turned the clock back to my childhood. I was human again. They assured us that everything would be all right. The same loudspeakers that had for years carried voices of hate now sent messages of freedom and hope. All I could think about was the sight of real flesh and blood American soldiers. I'd never in my life seen an American soldier, but now these men tore down the walls of Jericho, and the promised land of freedom was open before us. Besides the sight of the Americans, the scenes of our fellow prisoners with the German officers gave us good reason to smile, to laugh, to rejoice, and to hope. The Americans' arrival was a miracle that saved our lives and thwarted the murderous plot of the Germans. The Nazis had planned without pity to annihilate every soul, close to 30,000 human beings in our camp, who, for no crime or sin, were methodically herded and rounded up in loving homes, families living in peace, and made almost overnight into Catholic Germans to do with as they pleased. None but the imprisoned and the oppressed can fully appreciate the meaning of the word freedom. It is the most precious gift of life. Liberty and freedom are both words that glide easily off the tongue, but freedom arrives through much hardship and pain for those without it. What is freedom? It is incomprehensible. It would take a lifetime to fully express it. Whether you've seen combat or not, served on active duty or in the reserves, anyone who's willing to fight for our freedom is a hero in my eyes, and I'd like to thank you all from the bottom of my heart.
Tripp, thank you so much.